Welcome to the 26th edition of Women's Wrestling Weekly, the show. I am Kyle Klingman, joined by Scott Beck. Topic number one from the 2025 U.S. Open comes from the men's masters side. Simpson women's college head wrestling coach Jeff McGinness, an absolute hammer, two-time NCAA champion, undefeated four-time Iowa High School state champion. In my opinion, one of the greatest two. He's in the top two of the greatest Iowa high school wrestlers of all time. Went to the University of Iowa, won a title at 126 in 1995, bumped up to 142 in 1998, and won that championship in his senior year. An absolute hammer. Has taken a long break, and then because of a bet by his team, he entered the Masters division at the U.S. Open and got third place. Now you wonder, how could someone as credentialed as Jeff McGinness get third place? We're going to dive into that. He lost to a guy named Rudy James, who was a two-time NAIA All-American. Started late, so he started in 10th grade and then started getting good. And he's one of these guys that came on my radar in 2009, entered a Masters tournament, and I've been paying attention to him ever since. Has made every world team, Masters world team since 2015, won a Masters world title in 2023, an absolute stud. And he defeated McGinness 6-0 in the semifinals. And I think the lesson here is just because you are great, which Jeff McGinness is, means there's a lot of things when you take a 25-year break going against someone who is really good and has all the skills and has been doing this for the last 20 years and has wrestled nearly 40 tournaments. There's timing, there's rhythm, and if you watch Jeff in the matches, the first match he had a scramble, and those things exhaust you. Even talking to Jeff, he said his warm-up was a little different, and he warmed up too early because of the anticipation. There's so many things that go into it, and even when he was wrestling Rudy James, you could tell he understood some of the positions where he needed to be. He just didn't have some of the reactions that he probably wanted because he's been off the mat for 25 years. So just because he lost that match, I think if he were to continue to compete, which I don't know if he's going to do, I think this might have been a one and done. I think he continued to get better and better and better all the time.
Kyle, I think it goes back to what we've talked about where like wrestling's just it's not a recreational sport. And you could drill in the room. If you're not feeling it, it's just different. As you said, Jeff McGinness was an absolute hammer, just as tough as they come. And you know, he looked pretty good and you could see the talent there. It's just 25 years later, it's just very difficult, and James is game on and takes his stuff very seriously, and that goes back to, it's just not a recreational sport.
And I laugh a little bit because in the corner, you're seeing some of the advice during one of the breaks, and they're showing him, here's what you need to do. Jeff McGinness knows what to do. I just think in that situation, his body just would not react to what he wanted to do. And we even saw this with Jim Miller, who was a Division One national finalist. He kind of made a comeback at the age of 69, wrestled a 59-year-old, and that guy didn't even make a varsity team that he was wrestling, but he had been doing it. He was 10 years younger, and like Jim Miller's son said, when you get up into that age, every year is like dog years. So
Yeah.
you're talking about a 10-year gap going against
Those
that.
are big 10 years at
Yeah,
that period in your
that's a
life,
big 10 years. And
Yeah.
so, and it's a 43 to 50 range. Jeff is on the end of that. And it just reminded me a little bit in a different context of Haley Augello, who retired at 25 and then said, I want to empty the tank and I want to come back at the age of 29. And so when she did come back, she said she was nervous when she entered the 2023 Bill Farrell Memorial International. She was,
Yeah.
yeah, she was an Olympian in 2016, said, I want to make a comeback on this. And she said she was nervous, lost a couple matches, lost to someone that I think she's better than, Vicky Baez DeLone, and then Diana Weaker. And then what does she do? She comes back at the U.S. Nationals, places third, gets a little better, loses 6-6 to Katie Gomez, and then gets a little better at the Olympic trials, makes the Olympic trials finals, beats Katie Gomez 4-1, loses to Dom Parrish in the best of three. But you can just see incrementally she's getting
Every
better.
time she wrestled, she got better.
She
And,
did.
at first she was kind of feeling it out and then she just got her confidence back. I mean, she was beating Eri Tasaka, who's, I think ran that quad, three-time world champ, Olympic champ, at one point in that match, in the Olympics. That would have been an upset. And then she, kind of in the middle of the match, so maybe late in the match, she got beat. But yeah, Haley's very tough, and it took her a little while, to get her sea legs back. And as we said, every year you get older, it gets more difficult for
And
sure.
and on top of that, it's just because you're doing something good in the room and you feel good and you're dominating, you got to make weight. You've got to be on the mat at a certain time. It's the timing, the flow. It's not just kind of play wrestling. You don't have different rules on breaks. You have an official there. It's completely
It's
different.
completely different, and the nerves are going. Your mouth gets dry. Your stomach feels the butterflies, especially if you haven't competed in a while. And there are people that tell you, it doesn't matter who they're wrestling. It could be like relative to them, somebody that's just not remotely as close to ability, and you're still nervous. And people have said, like, if you don't get nervous, then it's time to, retire, because you're always going to have that fight or flight, but your body just can't execute. When you're younger, your body can get that adrenaline and do things, and your mind still thinks you can do it probably, and your body just can't.
And just going back to the Rudy James situation, he starts late. He starts in 10th grade. So he wants to continue on and say, how far can I take this? And so he didn't empty his chamber. When you reach NCAA championship level and you get to that mountaintop, it's hard to say something else is out there, but Rudy James found there is something out there and kept going with it.
Yeah, and he's caught my radar. I mean, the guy's in exceptionally good shape. Really looks fit, and the results are like very consistent. So, yeah, it's a testament to him that it's kind of probably pretty cool for him. Not only is he a Masters world champ, but he's taking out some good people along the way to make the teams.
On the U.S. Open front, we'll start with the bookends 50 kilograms and 76 kilograms. Here's the storyline 0 points surrendered, all first period techs or falls. Audrey Jimenez, I got corrected on that from David Pastoriza. He said it's Jimenez, so we'll try to pronounce that correctly. Audrey Jimenez looked fantastic at 50 kilograms. Kylie Welker looked fantastic at 76 kilograms. One of the questions we had on last show was, would Kylie Welker dominate through the U.S. Open? The answer is yes. She blitzed the entire field, and that field included 13 college national championships between
Hmm.
multiple different wrestlers. She just looked fantastic. She's the class
Yeah.
field, no domestic peer right now.
No, she looked great. And, I talked to her father a bunch before the finals match. We were warming up right near them. And, it's the biggest, she's feeling good. She's ready to go. And, his biggest concern, and we got into a side about all this, and then Joe Norton was part of this discussion as well, was just, for the women, just, staying healthy, and it's a little different. I know there's a random, aside, but we're just talking about how women are different than men, and they are, whatever it is, they are, and their bodies are different, and the way they train. So, I think there's, we still are gathering data. The sport's still relatively new, so you don't know how people age, and learning how to train without overdoing it is very important, and that's an issue with, I know, with my daughter, with Welker, especially the wrestlers, are very physical. It takes a toll. So his concern was that. I thought Welker looked phenomenal. You and I have talked about her a lot. We think exceptionally highly of Kylie. Remember that rhyme? And Audrey looked great. I mean, Jimenez, she's just game on. She wrestles a beautiful style to watch. And we thought, Aaron Goldson was the legitimate challenger, and she was. And Emily Shilson took fourth. She didn't look great. I don't know if she's still, coming back, or she just, I don't, she'd never really, for somebody that's won worlds at every age group, she has yet to prove herself really at the senior level.
With Audrey, the one thing that you have to admire about her is that it's her transition offense. She gets in on a shot and she's looking for a turn right away. And the best wrestlers in the world have a turn, and you see that time and time again. Even with Dom Parrish, when she won it in 2022, she got to her turn. And I
Well,
just, that's
she likes Ecuador, who's exceptionally good, and that was a trying to remember, like that was, I think, the toughest match she had, or was on paper. She teched her, but she's exceptionally good, the Ecuadorian wrestler there, and she, you know, went right into the lace, and yeah, the good ones are looking for it. And on defense, the key thing is if you're wrestling someone like that and you get taken down, you better not mope or pout because you have a quarter of a second to immediately transition apart to your defense.
Audrey has that style where when she gets in, it's just like a gnat. She is staying on you and she is relentless on that and she's looking for a score immediately. And then right away, she wants to get on top and get the turns. And she did that. Both she and Kylie were looking for that the entire time.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what else we can say other than brilliant. I think
And
right now
then
they are absolutely the favorites to make the world team. And I'd be surprised if they didn't at this point.
I've nothing to add to that. It's that simple, I think, at the moment.
Lots to dive into on these two weight classes, 53 kilograms and 65 kilograms. Here's the story arc, and they both have a similar one. They both placed second at the National Collegiate Women's Wrestling Championships in 2024. They both placed fifth at the National Collegiate Women's Wrestling Championships in 2025, and they are both U.S. Open champions. That's Brianna Gonzalez at 53 kilograms and Aine Drury at 65 kilograms. We'll start with Brianna Gonzalez. We talked about this right after is how could this happen? I've thought about this obsessively and went back to look at what's happened this year for Gonzalez. So you have to go back to the national championship. So in the semifinals, she has a match against Claire Bowie that really was decided by the referees. There were two activity clock points. It's one of the maddest I've ever seen Tanya Verbeek. I saw her say this. She said, "That's on you" to the referees. And if you go back to the video, you can hear her say that. That's on you. So that's one of those matches. That's a 50-50 match with Claire Bowie that could have gone either way. She scored the only takedown in the match. Bowie got 2 points on activity clock and then got a step out. So Bowie gets to the finals. She meets up against Sydney Petzinger. Petzinger won the championship. I feel like it was her year, but if Brianna Gonzalez gets there, you have to say she has a shot at winning.
Absolutely.
Because she's 2-1 against her all-time career. So what's your reward for losing on the backside for Brianna Gonzalez? You get the number one seed, which happens to be a U23 world champion from Japan, Yu Sakamoto, and she loses 6-5. So she's right there.
Yeah, that's a deceptive fifth place for sure.
Very deceptive. So you look at the results and you say fifth place. Okay. Then she goes to the U23 Nationals. Loses in I don't believe in flukes, but she was up 6-0 against Ecart Galumet and then had this situation that they actually challenged because she got pinned. And I think they were trying to say she hooked her somewhere. I was trying to figure out exactly what happened there. Then she comes back and gets third. Then she goes to the US Open. I think she's on fire at this point. And I think she's motivated. I think she's made adjustments and she's wrestled as well as I've ever seen her. Just an absolute run to the finals. Meets up against Felicity Taylor, who she lost to at the Olympic trials and the National Collegiate Women's Wrestling Championships in 24, her former teammate, and wins by a point, comes back at the end. Brianna Gonzalez looked fantastic.
Well, there's a part of me that's just utterly perplexed, and you say, "How can this happen?" And I think you explained it pretty well that she just missed at the other tournament, but maybe this liberated her to wrestle freely, and she was pissed off and went out there and just said, "I'm gonna go and scrap," because she looked phenomenal and she had to beat some good people. She beat Katie Gomez 3-0, completely shut her down. Taylor had a lead early, looking kind of control of the match, but Gonzalez has a great sweep single and is a great finisher. What she also does really well is if she's in short offense and she's running like head in the hole, she'll then drop down the leg, which is very sweet. And she finished a high percent of her shots. She looked really good. I was getting a little down on her, to be honest with you, based on the results. I didn't know every nuance like you did about, at the time. I just saw the results and I'm like, wow, she's supposed to be winning national titles. What's going on? Well, she won a national title and now she's sitting in Final X. So that was a great effort in a very tough weight class. A lot of national champs. Jocelyn Gallegos took 6. She's a national champion. So very tough weight. Yeah. It was amazing. Great job by her.
Yeah, and she teched Sage Mortimer in the semis, who Sage was moving up a weight class, and she's had a good season. She's a U23 world champ.
Yeah, and Sage has looked phenomenal, all year. And you could see the adjustment to the weight a little bit. I don't think Sage necessarily looks small, but maybe she's adjusting to it. That was a surprising result to me as well. I like watch some of these matches kind of half stunned. I don't know when we want to do a sides and talk about it, but you talk about watching it. It was hard to follow this tournament. Being there, Kyle. I didn't like the venue at all. It was very spread out. You would match lady wrestlers, and then you had Masters Greco in the middle, and then some other lady wrestlers, and then you'd have some 6-year-olds just floating around. Ladies are trying to warm up. You'd have 8-year-olds or 10-year-olds like running between them. It was really, I think I've been to a lot of tournaments in my life and have some idea how to use the technology. The bout board only showed 2 deep. You also had a bunch of different tournaments on the bout board. Normally you'd have one for seniors. Here it was all mixed together. You never knew when you're coming up. They started the first round with a ton of mats. It was over in, before you blinked. We were like match number 87, and 10 minutes in the tournament, they're like on match 43. So I just felt it was, maybe I just have a place in my heart for the South Point, but it was just really hard to follow the tournament, and there's too much going on. It was not an arena kind of setup, and it was a little disappointing that, just as a fan, you really didn't know what the hell was going on.
And I don't know what the solution is, because South Point, from what I hear, they were not going to invite anything other than, I think, horse show, equestrian back to that arena. So that's out of the picture. I just think maybe it's hard to find a venue that can accommodate what wrestling needs. So I don't know what the next step is, and I'm just empathetic a little bit, because having run events, I know how hard it is to find venues and get things set up. So I understand, and I just appreciate the work that goes into it.
I get it. I'm sorry I'm jumping on here, but this is the U.S. Open, and I don't think senior athletes should be weighing in with 6-year-olds on the line, running around them, in the weigh-in line. And I just think it denigrates the competition a little bit. It was just a lot of family. It just was chaos. It felt like, and very hard to know what was going on. There were just so many mats. It's all flat. You had the race stage in the one area, but the other part's flat, and you couldn't follow it as a fan. And I just, it was disappointing to me. I'm sorry, but I know it's hard, and I don't know what the deal with the venue is. Maybe you shouldn't have 100 tournaments in the same weekend. What was there, 17 or something? Some crazy number. It's just too much. Separate the seniors. I'm sure it's, about money and, maximizing, the venue, but, and what you're renting, but at what cost? Because this to me is disrespectful to senior level athletes.
Yeah, and it was a lot. It was hard to navigate and get around and get to the mats. And fortunately, yeah, you get to a point where you just say, I want to go see this, but I got to just go all in right here because there's so much going on. So yeah, it was hard. Yeah, I watched much of it retroactively.
You should at least have a certain division. You're on these 4 mats, or these 6 mats are all next to each other, and you know what you're looking at. It was just all over the place to me a little bit, and I don't know. And I felt like it was rushed. Like, why do you have to have the first round, when people are wrestling, off the scale 2 hours later? Like, why do you need 9, 10 mats for the first round? Like, it should progress in a reasonable cadence.
All good points that I appreciate you bringing up, because yeah, this is important for the future, because the U.S. Open is a big deal and it's a special tournament.
Yeah, it is. And I'll add, one positive thing was kind of nice. A bunch of people came up to both me and you and talked about the show, and it was good to see that people watch it, and appreciate that we're doing it. And I appreciate that they let me know. People I didn't know came up to me. We're doing this to try to help the sport, and it meant a lot to me, actually, and I know it did to you as well. So I really appreciate the feedback. And I'm willing to hear negative feedback as well, because, we always want to be the best we can, and we care about it. So that was good to see.
Yeah, love women's wrestling. It's beyond anything I thought I could ever love this much, and it's a special place for me and you. So I do appreciate the feedback, and we'll give more feedback on what happened on the 65 kilogram weight class with Anya Drury. I think with that situation, it comes down to 2 words, and that is Jason Mormon. And that's what Anya said in the interview.
We got JM back in my corner, so I got that dog back in me. I had it, but it helps when JM's there.
She got her coach back. She got her mojo back. She got the person that believes in her, got her motivated back to the mountaintop. Of course, the strangest of strange circumstances, Jason Mormon out before the season starts. Strange circumstances why he left. We still don't know, but she did not have her through the duration of the season. I think some of the results showed she got fifth place at the National Collegiate Women's Wrestling Championships this season. You go back to it, she wrestles Riesler Mendy, who's good, gets teched by her. And then in a consolation semifinal match, she kind of rushes into a situation with Zoe Lentz, who is known for a headlock, just kind of works into that situation, gets headlocked and pinned. Don't know what you can say about that. And then she just wrestles on fire at the U.S. Open, pins Jen Page in the semifinals, and then has a shootout with Bellamere, who they exchange pins. They were both up in the matches that they lost by pin, which is interesting. And then she wins a shootout 8-7. So that was a fun match to see between those two rivals.
Yeah, I mean, they have a good back and forth, and that was a difficult weight class. So great job by Drury. I mean, Paige is a world medalist. Bellamere is an exceptionally good competitor. Lang's won a bunch of national titles, so that was a good weight class. And yeah, having a coach there matters. Who knows what the preparation was, or just psychological preparation of, maybe a little, feeling sorry for yourself. You lost your coach. I don't know, but she got together for this tournament. And again, it's crazy to me. Like you say, fifth in, college, and then you go win, in a difficult weight class, you go win the Open. So good job at her.
She got her mojo back. Now she is one of the two that knows her opponent for Final X. She'll wrestle Macy Kilty, as does Amanda Martinez at 57 kilograms. Interesting situation there. Jacarra Winchester makes it to the finals, but does not weigh in and forfeits that match. So she will now go to the World Team Trials, presumably at 55 kilograms, but just based on history and what she said, she might try to make 55, and if she has the option, she'll probably move up to 59 like she did last year. Not sure what she's thinking on that, but she will be at the World Team Trials, I would assume, Scott.
Yeah, I would assume as well. And, I don't know. 55 is, a tough cut for her, but she can make it if she wants to, probably. And we'll see where it is, if I was a betting man, I'd say 59 probably, but, we'll see what happens. I mean, it was, nobody knew what she was going to do at this tournament, and, once again, she got seated at a weight and then changed. But as long as it's within the rules, I don't have an issue with it. And that was within the rules.
Regardless, at 55 kilograms, the final X participant that we know is Cristelle Rodriguez. She has had quite a run, won a U20 World Championship last year, then blitzed her way through the college season, had the super match with Katie Gomez that she won in the NAIA championships, and now she's on top of the ladder at 55 kilograms. She won 4-1 over high school junior Everest Leydecker, who has really trended upward. She dominated her way through the U20 World Team Trials about 2.5 weeks ago. Now she reached the finals of the U.S. Open, which is a senior tournament, beat Villascusa in the semifinals, who looked fantastic. As you said, looked great in the room, is our returning World Team member at 55 kilograms. Tech Tamani Jones, who's a two-time H-level world bronze medalist and a two-time national champion. So she looked fantastic. So you have two young stars there at 55 kilograms.
Yeah, I mean, Rodriguez has had a phenomenal year. I thought Leydecker looked great. She's very long, very awkward style to wrestle against, and she knows how to wrestle to that style. She uses her body properly for that lengthy style. Beating him, attacking Monty Jones. But, Leydecker has a phenomenal lace. And I would add, she trains in the room with, my daughter. So you had, in the finals, you had 55, 59, because 57 was a forfeit, and then 62. So you had three valiant women back to back in the U.S. Open finals. I think that's a tribute, to Angel Cejudo and Larkin and, Kayla Miracle, who coaches the ladies, trains with my daughter. It's a good room. So I thought that's interesting. But Leydecker was exceptionally, impressive. And I'll be honest with you, I think she kind of got a little screwed in the finals. She was controlling ties and moving forward the whole match. Rodriguez never got cautioned or put on the clock. And, I'm not saying it would have changed the match, but who knows? I cannot believe that the ref, I'd say it was a theme throughout this tournament, in my opinion. I don't think the referees did a good job with passivity. I think there was they were putting people on the clock a lot slower than I believe they should have when somebody else was controlling center, pushing them forward. You know, I there was a bunch of matches that I noticed. I don't need to name them all, but I think that I would like to see what happened if he's put Rodriguez on the clock and the lead shrunk a little bit. Maybe she would have just opened up and scored again. I don't know, but tough weight class, phenomenal job by Leydecker, and I think the sky's the limit probably for her.
Abby Nette lost her father 2 months ago and wrestled inspired at 59 kilograms and won the U.S. Open title, 2 falls and 2 techs. Don't know if you want to comment on this, Scott, but I thought she looked good throughout the tournament, and she's a good person, and just feel for her situation, and it really came through in the interview.
I was going to jump right into this, but my dad died 2 months ago, and this tournament, it's all for him. It's all for him. Everything I do is for him. He's the reason why I'm here today. Our last conversation before he passed away was, I was crying to him and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to wrestle without you, Dad. And he couldn't really say much, but he said, you're gonna. And I feel closest to my dad whenever I'm wrestling. So that's why I'm here today. And I'm here to make my dad proud, and I know he's with me. So it's good.
Yeah, Abby is a good person, and we've beaten her, she's beaten us. My daughter Michaela wrestled her. I normally don't talk about her at all on the show in terms of her name wrestling, but Michaela had a lead, and it was a good example. 4-2 at the break, hit a good blast double right to a lace, and then the period ended. But she made a mistake, lost position, and didn't realize when you're in trouble, and then got pinned with a Nette kind of hooked the arm and then got an arm turk. But it's a good example though of that you need to realize when you need to bail, and I'm going to walk the walk on the things I say. I thought Michaela wrestled well this tournament, and she was pissed off as hell, and just not happy at all coming off the mat, because she believed that it was a winnable match and she was leading, and it was one situation. But that's the thing where you say, okay, so we could now, it would be great if you're in Final X. You're not. Now, Winchester may or may not be at 59. We don't know. But if she's going to go 59, you'd have to beat her Final X anyway to make the world team, right, if that's your goal. But more importantly than that, you say, what do you do right in this tournament? So I think there was a bunch of things in her wrestling that I really liked that she hadn't done before. Like finishing the second shot against Janiak. She gave up an exposure, went back to the same shot. So my point is, you can look at the things you need to work on. You did bad, but you also have to look at, does an athlete do positive things? So for me, I know things could be better in the matches, but I thought there was some good stuff, that you can build on. And I always believe that's the approach that you should take when you do a post-mortem on a tournament.
Kayla Miracle praised Michaela Beck in her interview after winning the U.S. Open at 62 kilograms. She defeated Adugo Nwachukwu 4-0. We'll go back to Nwachukwu semifinal match. What a shootout she had with Alaire Boyd. That was back and forth. One of those that you just step back and say, I'm so glad I'm watching this right now, because it was a blast. She had to come back right at the end, and that was excitement.
Yeah, Adugo's pulled some of those out. Good job by Alaire Boyd. She looked good at the Farrell when she came back this time. She was a little more healthy. Unfortunately, she did a semi-slide after that loss, but that's a tough loss. And, it's kind of it was a good tournament, I think, for her. I don't know how she feels about the last couple of matches, but, she wrestled Adugo really tough, and, Miracle beat Adugo 4-0, and one could say it's close. It wasn't really. It was just Kayla was in perfect position the whole match. Hit 2 firemen's to get the points on both takedowns. Never really was threatened. Kayla is very good at not sacrificing position for points and getting out of position. But, Adugo is very tough, and, there's a good weight class. It was good to see Boyd back, and she looked good. But Kayla, has some unfinished business, and I think this is her first time back wrestling in the competition since the Olympics. I think she, passed with flying colors. The other thing I'd like to say in that weight class, Savannah Cosme had a really good tournament. She, taking third. She beat Bridget Judy twice. and it's some good wins. And she's a competitor. She's scrappy, and she's a good person too. It's good, another valiant person. And it's good to see her take third.
68 kilograms, again, probably like 50 and 76. What else can you say about Kennedy Blaze? She's just absolutely the class of the field. The one thing I will say is that when she hits those suplays, it's so beautifully perfect. Even just the way she kicks her legs over on the way she gets the transition right at the end, it's just absolute perfect. It really is a work of art seeing her hit a suplay.
Yeah, I mean, beautiful is the word, and I like the fact that she enjoys being a crowd pleaser, and she goes for that stuff. She doesn't need to do it, but she does it because she knows she can, and it's fun to watch. She's very good, great tournament. Uh, I don't know what else to say. She looks really good, at 68.
72 kilograms, you have Alex Glaude. She reached Final X in 2019, losing to Tamara Mensah-Stock, who is outstanding, three-time world and Olympic champion. She was emotional after the match. She had a shootout with Bella Grote, and she came through the media area, and she was just absolutely in tears because she's been sticking with it, has been right there. Just like anything, you see it all the time. It's such a brutal existence, and it's not for the faint of heart. It's not just a recreational sport where you just kind of dabble with it and it's fun and you're just smiling and laughing and you can take a few losses and maybe you miss a three-pointer at the end. This is brutal, it's real, and you could just see the emotion on her face, and she was visibly moved to win the US Open title and have another shot at Final X.
Yeah, absolutely. And she wrestled very well, and Skylar Grote has been wrestling very well. She had just historically, she had one of the best comebacks, in a U23 bronze medal match against Mongolia. She was down by 4 with seconds to go and hit a blast double for 4 through the Mongolian and got the exposure. Won that. Yeah, it was good to see her win. I know Skylar Grote's probably very disappointed, and she's was having a good year. Good to see Joy Lewandowski, back on the mat. She took third. She's been injured, coaching. But I got to talk to her a little bit. She's a New Yorker as well and started as a lightweight. So we've wrestled her, but she looked good her first time back as well.
Scott, as we talked about before, 50 kilograms, probably the most interesting weight class with all of the deep dives and the rabbit holes you could go down. One person that I think deserves mention because she's still in high school is Heather Kroll. We talk about Leydecker and Jimenez when she was in high school. Kroll gets fifth place. I think she's good. She wins the U23 national championships, places second to Jimenez at the U20 World Team Trials. I think she could be a star on the rise on the college level. She's going to go to McKendree. I don't want to overlook someone as good as she is.
For sure. I mean, she beat Aine Falcon. She's very tough. We've watched her the last few weeks, and she's on the radar, and she's really good. And I think she's got a lot of upside for sure.
Kendra Ryan had a who's who of who she beat. I think she's beat 4 college national champions and a U23 national champion in Kroll. She placed third at 50 kilograms. She placed third at the National Collegiate Women's Wrestling Championship. So you have to be impressed by what she's done. Of course, when you get into the 50 kilogram weight class for the World Team Trials coming up, it's going to be difficult to make that final spot. But I think she's proven she's going to be a tough out wherever she is.
Yeah, I mean, beating Emily Shilson. I think she lost in an relatively early round. It really did a lot on the backside. Had a good run, in a very deep weight class. So very impressive. Another way, I'm jumping, Kyle, but we didn't really talk 57. Rana Gross, formerly Rana Heaton, taking third place. Tekken Moreno, Carolina Moreno, 3-time NAIA champ. For third and fourth was a strong showing by her. She was the 2021 Olympic finalist. She lost in the finals of the trials to Jacarra, right?
Yeah, I think it was World Team Trials that year where it was, and then I think she did make the Olympic trials finals. I think she also made the World Team Trials later and got beat there too. So she's she's had a kid and she's moving in. She did a pretty good job.
Yeah, absolutely. And Amanda Martinez had a solid tournament as well. Would have been nice to see wrestle Jacarra, but you can only wrestle who's in front of you. and she wrestled pretty well.
I thought 53 kilograms was the surprising weight class from Intrigue because you do have Sage Mortimer moving up. She got fourth place. Katie Gomez ended up third. That third place match was a 14-12 shootout, and we saw right at the end,
Fun match.
yeah, what Mortimer can do. Mortimer's just never out of it.
Oh my God, the headlock late. I mean, it was
Yeah.
crazy. If there was like literally like a half a second left, she might have gotten the fall. And trust me, Gomez knows that's coming and still couldn't stop it. Gomez hit some really clean shots. She took first time down, back down at 53. I think she, I'm not making excuses or anything, but I know that her weight was probably too light when she wrestled Gonzalez. And she didn't really have to cut any weight for the second weight. And I think she held her weight down too much and didn't manage that great from conversations that were had. And don't count her out for the world team.
And when you think about the World Team Trials coming up, you have Haley Augello, who will presumably be in the mix. So I think Haley Augello is watching, thinking, I could win this World Team Trials. It could be her spot because, as we've said, Haley Augello is going to be a tough out. I don't know where she is for conditioning, where she feels competition ready, but don't overlook Haley Augello when it comes to the World Team Trials just in a couple weeks.
Yeah, if she goes, I'm not convinced she's going.
Yeah, and I'm
We'll
saying
see.
presumably.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe she goes. Maybe she takes this year off. I mean, I know she's not in her head completely done with wrestling, but I don't know if what's going to happen at this juncture.
Final thoughts on the U.S. Open. I thought it was a good finals. I thought the most intrigue were at 50 and 53 kilograms. It was the first time I've ever just sat on the mat because they had all the placing matches, 7th, 5th, 3rd at one mat, and I sat there and I watched every single one of them. And the one thing you notice is because you've had so many matches, and this is just across the board for any tournament, you get tons of blood timeouts, tons of injuries because you've just been battling the entire weekend. And so your face is opened up, and there's just a lot of stoppages in those matches. But those are gritty, tough matches you have to pull out. I think that's some of the most entertaining wrestling, watching those placing matches.
Yeah, the placing matches, you see what people are made of, and it's kind of funny. This sound kind of counterintuitive, but a lot of times the people that don't win, that don't get to the finals a lot, upset people that are in theory better than them on paper or a pin or however you want to say it, because they're used to having to come back on the backside. The person who wins a lot or makes the finals a lot is distraught, and it's hard for them to refocus sometimes. And the other people are back, comfortable on the backside. They've been there, so it's always when somebody like a 1 seed or a 2 seed gets upset, and somebody with a lot of accolades, it's interesting to see, number one, if they even wrestle on the backside. And, I had a conversation where like, it seems like the women like stick it out and wrestle on the backside more than the men. The men, if they lose, a lot of them default out, So a tribute to the women that we didn't really do a lot of that, if at all. So I really appreciate that some of the ladies who were pretty upset with the result up to that point, to go and wrestle on the backside is I think shows a lot of character. My other final thought on the U.S. Open, man, Jax Forrest is good. We're talking about the men, we talk about Rana Heaton. It's just a pleasure to watch this young man wrestle and go at it and open up. And his style, he's like Buvasar Satiev, and he's really good. There's a lot of young talent, and he doesn't have the accolades of some of the other ones. He's lost, probably more than some of the high rank, but he's a real deal.
Joe Jamison from Ursinus was on last program just talking about, well, he wasn't on the program, but he had comments. He wanted to clarify some of those. So we were able to talk to Joe to clarify some of his comments on what he thought about the NCAA championships potentially having 18 or 21, why he thinks that's a mistake, and what he sees the future of women's college wrestling.
Thanks for having me on also, by the way, and I appreciate the follow-up. You and Scott do an awesome job on the show. It's fun to get the coverage for our women on like a weekly basis, not just every once in a while. So I think everyone in the sport really appreciates what you guys are doing. To follow up regarding the number of qualifiers, I mean, for me, coaching a D3 program, I think, obviously everybody wants as many as possible, right? We would all love to keep 32 person brackets. I just don't think that's going to happen personally. I think it'd be great if it does. I just don't think it will. And like I said to you, I think anything less than 24 person brackets is just a slap in the face. Especially for, the D3 programs where, let's be honest, the 2/3 of the programs are Division III right now, right? I don't know what the exact number is going to be next year, but it's going to be in the 90s, right? And over 60 of them are Division III. So this NCAA championship is being established on the backs of Division III programs, right? And now, if this championship gets dropped to 21 person brackets or even 18, it's going to take away opportunities from those athletes that have really helped create it, right? And for me, it's just an equity issue. I will say that I feel like here at Ursinus, we're in a great position, right? We're well funded. We fundraise a good amount. We have really high achieving student athletes. So we're in a really good spot. And so this is just me speaking off the cuff in like a general sense, right? On like what a non-scholarship school may have to go through. So for starters, we don't have any athletic scholarships, right? And so right off the bat, those conversations about what the cost of a small private institution, and we have nothing to offer some of the best athletes in the country when it comes to athletic aid, that hurts a little bit, right? But then not only that, obviously, like being a small Division III school, your budgets might be a little bit smaller. Your overall resources are going to be a little bit smaller. But for me, the biggest issue is the rules are different, right? So in Division III, unless you have an RTC, which we do, which is great for us, but a lot of schools don't. So unless you have an RTC setup, like you can't run practices in the off season. You can't have team lifts in the off season, or even like mandate them, right? In Division I and Division II, they get a certain number of hours that they're allowed to work with their athletes in the off season per week. I believe it's 8. We don't have that at all. We're actually not allowed to be allowed. Like I can't run a team lift right now. I'm not allowed. We have RTC, right? So those students that want to come to RTC on our men's and women's side, they can, but it's nothing that I can mandate. And so for me, that rule set is the biggest piece for me, right? It's just an unlevel playing field. With that all being said, like I do also, well, like I said, I hope we stay all together, right? I think it's a great thing. I love it. And a lot of our student athletes love it that, that we get to go to a tournament and see the Iowas and the Lock Havens and the McKendrys and King. Like we love that. But there has to be some way to level the playing field a little bit. That was one of the reasons why we started an RTC here. So we can continue to work on the things that we want to work on. But if they're going to take away qualifying spots, this is going to hurt Division III, right? And I just can't see a scenario where Division III is going to stay all together if it's going to go less than 240 athletes. We'll still get some high level athletes because they care about their academics, right? Like we're one of the top academic schools in women's wrestling. So if that's really important to them, we'll still be able to recruit them and have conversations. But there's girls right now that I'm talking to that are juniors in high school that I don't think would even entertain a conversation with us if we were in a Division III only championship.
Scott, you had several one-on-one conversations with college coaches about one-on-ones with their athletes. What did you learn?
Yeah, Kyle, I was really curious about how they structure it. If an athlete's, to get better, if they want to work on stuff. And I know, the assistant coaches like Amanda Martinez, Alara Boyd, Arelis Valleys, I know that they're putting in the hours just from conversation. So I said, how do you approach it? And most of them said, for the starters, they normally schedule it. Especially if it's a team with a lot on the roster, but the second and third strings, if they ask, can get it. But and some coaches are a little looser with the starters where it's up to them. Success and improvement to the ones that are taking the initiative to want to work one-on-one on their weaknesses with their coaches, So I thought that was interesting. Because it's always interesting to me to see, how do you get your athletes better? What's your approach? The other thing that I thought was interesting in my conversation was Joe Norton saying that, he's not like it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, staying healthy. He's like, he's not into it's a long season. You're wrestling every weekend. He's not going like medieval amounts of live wrestling, every day. He wants his athletes to drill. They'll go live sometimes, but they're not just really trying to bang and kill each other, before, they go into, competition. So it was good to see, a lot of these coaches. Some I know, some I don't know as well. Talked to, Ashley Flavin and, Christian. So it was good. I hung out with Lee Miracle a lot. So it was really good to just, see people's perspectives.
Scott, let's end with this. It worked. We have on the University of Iowa website, Val Solorio is officially off the pronunciation guide. So that has been fixed. Nate Solorio told me that. So you go to the Iowa page, you cannot get the wrong pronunciation. So glad that happened. Now, we'll have an endless list of names. And so
Yeah.
this is a situation where I made a mistake. I had the right pronunciation for Brian Vuitinides, but I spelled it wrong when I put his picture. So now this isn't a mistake. I told him this. I said, this is the best thing that could happen to you because now we get to mention you again. We get to talk about how Presbyterian was the first Division I women's program. My mistake will lead to more recognition for Brian and his program. And one other one that seems easy is Brazil Marquez. She's the head women's coach at Lehigh. It's spelled Brazel. A lot of people say Brazil. It's actually pronounced Brazil. So people that know her, it is Brazil. And another one, Maddie Neuenhuis. We'll put the spelling up there and you'll see why that might be difficult. But the name game will never end. I'm sure that will be a segment that we'll have for the foreseeable future because there's always names we need to get right.
And then once we get into international competition, we'll really have a field day with how bad we are and how we butcher everything. It's funny. You have a way that you like when you see a name, your mind like hears it a certain way, and it could be completely wrong.